If you're listening with the lights off, keep them off, because what I'm about to tell you isn't the kind of story that gets better when you look around and confirm you're alone. This is Whisper Loop. If the hush in your room feels a little heavier than it should, tap like, subscribe, and leave a comment, just to prove you were here and the night didn't swallow you whole. Now listen, I didn't choose the hotel. I didn't even book it. My wife did, while our son was finishing his final week of term. 3 nights, she said. Good location, walkable, close to food. She showed me pictures that were careful in the way cheap hotels are. Tight angles, bright bulbs, no corners. We drove in late, the streets still wet from an afternoon storm. Penang smelled like street foods and frying garlic, and the old shop houses leaned together like gossiping aunties. The hotel sat among them, a narrow building squeezed into the block, its sign a rectangle of tired blue light. I remember thinking the letters looked too thin, like someone had shaved them down. The lobby fan pushed warm air in circles. A man behind the counter looked up and smiled like he was lifting a mask. 3 nights? He asked, already reaching for our keys. He slid the card across the desk, and it stuck for a moment as if the counter had a tacky film. 7th floor, he said. The elevator had a faint mildew sweetness, like damp paper. Our son bounced on his toes, excited. Holiday mode activated. My wife watched the numbers climb, her hand resting on his shoulder. When the doors opened, the hallway felt narrower than it should have. The carpet was patterned in dark vines that seemed to tangle in the corners. The lights weren't bright, they were polite. They didn't illuminate so much as suggest. We walked. I didn't say anything, but I counted the doors, because I always count doors in places I don't know. It's a habit from my army days. Count exits, memorize the nearest route back, note anything unusual. The hallway went on longer than the elevator ride had promised. We passed a service closet with a padlock, then a vending alcove with a soda machine that hummed, even though it was unlit. The corridor bent slightly, and for a second I couldn't see the end. I felt the urge, sharp and irrational, to turn around and go back to the elevator, before I learned what lay farther down. Then I saw it. The last door, not ours. The last door sat at the very end, facing the wall like a reprimand. The frame looked newer than the others, the peephole too clean. I watched it as we approached, waiting for our number. Our room was the second from the end, a small relief, as if I'd narrowly avoided a bad omen. Inside, the air was cool but stale. The room was simple, 2 double beds, a narrow desk, curtains that didn't close fully. The bathroom tile had hairline cracks like spiderwebs. When my wife opened the closet, a wave of dampness rolled out. Not rot, worse. That smell of fabric that never truly dries. It's fine, she said quickly, like she was bargaining with the trip itself. Our son flopped onto a bed and laughed. It's like a movie hotel, he said. I wanted to tell him to stop saying things like that. The first night passed without drama. We showered, watched a bit of television, and fell asleep to the thin hum of the air conditioner. When I woke at dawn, my heart steady, I felt stupid for my earlier tension. The second day was bright. We ate char kway teow, walked the streets, took pictures. We returned sun-tired, our son nodding off in the elevator. That night, the room's damp smell seemed stronger, like it had been waiting for the door to close. We slept. I'm a light sleeper. I've always been. A dripping faucet can drag me out of dreams like a hook. So when I heard voices, I woke almost instantly. At first, it was just the cadence of speech. 2 people, maybe a man and a woman. The words were too soft to grasp, like conversation through water. I lay still, listening. The sound seemed to come from the wall beside my bed, the wall shared with the room closer to the end, the one between us and the last door. They were talking, casually, like late-night murmurs. I frowned at the thinness of the walls. Cheap hotel. The voices faded and I drifted. Then a different sound pulled me back. A woman crying, not sobbing loudly. A small, restrained cry, like someone trying not to wake a child. And another voice, a woman this time, speaking over and over, repeating the same tone, the same rhythm. It wasn't a conversation, it was a loop. I checked my phone. 3:18 a.m. The crying continued and the speaking continued, soft and relentless. The phrases were too blurred to understand, but the repetition was unmistakable. Like the woman speaking had only been given a handful of lines. I clenched my jaw, annoyed. I tried to ignore it, but each time I slipped towards sleep, the crying would change, shift in pitch, the way an old recording works, and the speaking would follow, identical as before. At 4:10 a.m., I turned onto my side and pressed my ear closer to the wall. the sound sharpened by a fraction. The crying woman's breath hitched, and the other voice, gentle, coaxing, kept repeating something that sounded like instructions. I still couldn't make out the words. I told myself it was just a couple fighting or someone having a breakdown. People do that. I told myself not to be curious. Curiosity is the thing that unlatches doors. At 5:02 a.m., the volume rose as if someone had stepped closer to the wall. The crying grew more urgent. The speaking voice grew firmer. It was the same pattern, same beats, same pauses. But now, between the words, I heard something else. A light scraping, not footsteps, like fingernails traveling down wallpaper. I swallowed and stared into the dark. My wife and son slept. The air conditioner rattled once and went quiet. The scraping repeated. My skin prickled. I closed my eyes and focused. This time, the words didn't blur as much. Closer, the speaking woman said. The crying intensified. Closer, the voice repeated, with the same exact inflection. A pause. Then, don't look away. I opened my eyes. The room was unchanged, but the wall beside my bed looked darker than it had a moment ago, like the shadow there had thickened. I sat up a little, just enough to see the line where the wall met the ceiling. And that's when I felt it. A faint tickle on my cheek. At first I thought it was a hair. I brushed my face. The tickle remained, moving, slow as a spider. I brushed again, still there. I frowned and opened my eyes wider. The tickle became pressure. 2 light points near my jaw, like fingertips testing the surface of my skin. I froze, because I hadn't moved my hand. The pressure slid upward. A whisper, so close it wasn't sound but vibration, touched the air near my ear. Closer. My throat tightened. I turned my head slowly. Something hovered inches from my face. Not a person, not fully. A suggestion of a face, blurred like wax, warmed by a flame. Features smeared, eyes too bright, mouth stretched into an eager shape that didn't quite belong. It was smiling at me, as if it recognized me. And then it leaned in, and I smelled damp plaster and cold metal. Don't look away, it said. My body reacted before my mind caught up. I shouted, a raw, involuntary sound, and my son jolted upright. Dad, he whispered. My wife stirred. What's wrong? I blinked fast, my heart hammering. The thing was gone. The wall was only a wall. The air conditioner resumed its thin hum. I forced a laugh that sounded like it belonged to someone else. Nothing, I said, too quickly. Bad dream. Go back to sleep. My wife watched me for a second, then lay back down. Our son hesitated, then copied her. I checked the time. 5:31 a.m. Outside, the sky was beginning to pale. In the silence that followed, I realized the voices through the wall had stopped. No crying, no repeating instructions, no scraping. The room held its breath. I didn't sleep again. When morning came, I told myself it was stress, driving fatigue, the strange corridor playing tricks, the kind of dream you have when you're half awake. But I kept thinking about the repetition. A loop. Why would a real argument loop like that for hours? That afternoon, I found myself watching the hallway when we left our room, studying the door between us and the last room. I noticed its peephole was covered, taped over from the inside, or maybe from the outside. I couldn't tell. That night, I told my wife I'd speak to the front desk about the noise. She rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic, she said. It's just a cheap place. I waited until checkout. At the counter, the same man stood beneath the spinning fan. He asked if our stay was okay. I kept my voice calm. The guests next door were loud. Late at night, it carried through the wall. He blinked, then smiled again, slow. Which room? I gave the number. His fingers tapped the keyboard. He frowned at the screen, genuinely puzzled. Then he said, "Sir, that room hasn't been rented this week." My stomach dropped. I laughed because that's what you do when your brain refuses to accept a sentence. He didn't laugh back. "It's empty," he repeated, softer. "We keep it empty." I felt my scalp tighten. "Why?" I asked. He looked past me, toward the elevator, toward the corridor above us, as if he was checking whether something had followed me down. "It's better," he said, and his smile finally fell away. We left. On the street, sunlight baked the old stones. Life felt loud and normal, and the normality made the last 2 nights feel like a private humiliation. That night at home, with our bags still half unpacked, I did what I should have done before we ever arrived. I searched for the hotel. The reviews were a mess. people complaining about smells, staff, water pressure. Then I found a short comment from a profile without a picture. Room near end of hall. Don't stay. Another comment beneath it. The end room isn't a room. And then one sentence that sat on the screen like a finger pressed to a lip. They practice the same words until you answer. I stared at that line for a long time, because I remembered the voice by my ear. Closer. Don't look away. And I realized the worst part wasn't that I'd heard them through an empty wall. The worst part was that the voices had stopped the moment the sky began to lighten, like something had been waiting for the night to be deep enough. Like it only needed a few hours. Like it had almost finished. I still dream of that hallway sometimes. Not the whole hotel, just the 7th floor corridor, stretching longer than it should, with polite lights that don't illuminate. And I'm always walking, always counting doors, always relieved when I'm not assigned the last room, and always somehow ending up at the second door from the end. Because in the dream, my key card doesn't work. And from the empty room beside me, I hear a woman crying softly, and another voice, gentle, patient, repeating the same instruction. Closer. When you finish this story, check the quietest wall in your room. Not the one you think is thin, the one you think is safe. If you heard something repeating, or if you've ever woken up with the feeling that the night was practicing you, tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, stories that don't slam the door but leave it slightly open, tap like, subscribe, and join us here on Whisper Loop.